from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast.
The 2017 Farm Journal Midwest Crop Tour kicks off. Will set expectations. Plus, will markets be watching?
I think in a year, like you said, with so much variability, the more data, the better.
I'm Mike Hoffman. Will clouds block your view of the historic eclipse? I'll have our farm country forecast.
Machinery Pete says the crop tour could have a lasting impact on farm auctions this fall. And a shot in the heart. You won't believe how this Wisconsin farmer got to the hospital and what may have saved his life.
AgDay, presented by the Chevy Silverado. High-strength steel for high-strength dependability.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Field Scouts step off this morning on the first full day of the Farm Journal Midwest Crop Tour, and we'll be tracking it every step of the way.
Coverage of the 2017 Farm Journal Midwest Crop Tour is brought to you by DuPont Pioneer, with you from the word go.
More than 100 scouts will examine about 1,400 samples of corn and soybeans between Ohio and Nebraska over the next 4 days. Daily crop size estimates and pod counts will come from the 7 states. And at the end of the week, Farm Journal Pro will release its official estimate of the national corn and soybean crops.
And those crop estimates take into account the tour data that we've gathered the 4 previous days. It also takes into account the areas outside of where the tour goes, weather, how we feel crops will finish, ear weights, pod weights, that type of stuff. So there are many more factors that come into play.
This year marks the 25th consecutive crop tour, and that's a key part of the success of the scouting because that consistency helps to ensure impartial data can be accurately compared year after year.
It's amazing how much the crop tour has grown, not only the effort of going out and collecting those samples, but how much more attention the crop tour gets now than what it did 25 years ago. Today, 2017, it's almost turned into a real-time event for the industry. They're getting information on a continuous basis from the crop tour.
One of the best ways to follow the crop tour is via Twitter. We'll be using hashtag FJTours17 as our handle. There'll also be constant updates on agweb.com, and we'll have daily recaps on Ag Day all this week. Of course, I'll host a special edition of the crop tour next Monday. The scouts will be checking to see how weather has impacted crops. USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey describes it as an imperfect growing season in the Midwest, mostly due to erratic rainfall. But cooler temperatures have also played a role.
If you look at the Corn Belt as a whole, we have not experienced much in the way of heat stress once you move outside of those far western and southwestern Corn Belt areas. So as we move through the rest of the summer, I mean, certainly the first half of August has been incredibly cool, with temperatures running some 4 to 8 degrees below average during the first half of August. And even though it looks like we'll be warming up a little bit and see more closer to average temperatures for the remainder of the month, I don't think we'll see any significant stress on filling corn and soybeans.
As a benchmark for the northern Corn Belt, Rippey points to Chicago, which had only 8 days of 90-degree heat this growing season and just 1 day hitting 95 degrees. In addition to the Farm Journal Crop Tour coverage this week, AgDay is also revisiting some of the farmers we first met this spring during our I-80 planning tour. That tour follows the highway from Ohio to Nebraska, including stops in the Big I states. Betsy Gibbon joins us now with what she learned from her mid-season check. Betsy?
When we first met Matt Nelson in Burke County, Nebraska, he had a slow start to plant 2017. Now Matt says early season moisture, which helped him this spring, is a blessing. He says the corn and soybean crop held up well during some dry weeks because of it. And 4 inches of rain last week helped too. Matt thinks dry land and irrigated corn crops could be better than he expected weeks ago, potentially average or above. Neola, Iowa looks dry compared to when we saw Eric Peterson during planting. Peterson says the crop in his area of western Iowa has a lot of heat stress. Hardly any rain in July, with high temperatures reaching in the 90s and even 100s during a critical time for corn. He says the crop is variable. He's expecting below average for corn, but still has high hopes for soybeans. Some eastern Iowa farmers like Mark Mummathai in Waverly, Iowa had a late start to planting, but his pocket in Iowa is not highlighted in the drought monitor. Mark says the area had a wonderful July with adequate rainfall and ideal temperatures, But he's received less than half an inch of rain in August, a critical month for soybeans. If he can catch a rain, he believes he could have great yields with both crops. We caught John Kiefner in Manhattan, Illinois when he was planting. He says the area had a dry June, but mid-July rains of 6 inches rejuvenated the corn and soybeans. He's optimistic the corn crop in his area will be above trendline yield. He thinks beans hold a lot of promise as well. Jim Smith lives in northeast Indiana, just miles from the Ohio border. He says the crops are looking better than expected, but they are still behind in maturity. He has not tallied estimates on corn since some pollination occurred 2 weeks ago, adding beans hold promise with lots of pods on the stems. Josh Schumacher in Pandora, Ohio, says his area is fortunate this year, while other pockets of Ohio are struggling. He says his bubble picked up plenty of adequate moisture. He says there's limited crop stress because temperatures were ideal for pollination.
While the Corn Belt varies with conditions, one thing remains the same. Most farmers say they do not need an early frost. Reporting for AgDay, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
All right, thanks, Betsy. Beyond the start of NAFTA negotiations, there were several trade wins for the administration last week. In Colombia, Ag Secretary Sonny Perdue says the USTR has worked out a deal to expand imports of U.S. paddy or rough rice. The agreement loosens previous rules and requirements related to phytosanitary standards. It also rolls back expensive fumigation and processing requirements. Now, exports of paddy rice to Colombia are currently about $15 million a year. Perdue expects that number to climb. The vice president tweeting late Thursday that Argentina is lifting its 25-year-old ban on U.S. pork. The two countries agreeing to terms to allow U.S. pork back into the Argentinian market. Officials say it's not likely to be a big market right away, but could open things up to future growth. And South Korea announcing it's resuming imports of U.S. poultry products, including eggs. It was one of the few countries that imposed a total ban on U.S. poultry following the outbreak of avian influenza in Tennessee this spring. Now, last fall, South Korea had to destroy 30 million of its own hens. This new agreement temporarily allows U.S. eggs and egg products into the country duty-free. Mike Hoffman has a further look at crop conditions around the country in this morning's Crop Comments. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Clinton. We're starting off in Manhattan, Illinois. John Kiefner sending us a picture of his pumpkin patch in the area. He says the pumpkins are in good condition this year. He hopes to bring in $5,000 of retail from his 2 acres of pumpkins. A bit north in Wyoming, Ontario, Canada, Carl Armstrong says his soybeans are fair to good. He's experienced heat and timely rains. However, he says you don't have to go too far to find some drought areas where those farmers can't catch a rain. And taking a look at that chance of seeing eclipse forecast, the least likely area is really much of Nebraska into Missouri, only a 20 to 40% chance. You might get lucky with some breaks in the clouds. The better chances are along the coast, as you can see, with Oregon being the best chance, 80 to 100% chance of actually seeing the eclipse. We'll be back with your forecast coming up, but first here are some hometown temps.
With Crop Tour kicking off today, we'll talk about what it means for markets. That's coming up. Plus, Machinery Pete weighs in.
Stay tuned, folks. Coming up, we'll talk how that USDA crop report is affecting used farm equipment values around the country.
And a shot through the heart isn't always meant to be literal, but for this Wisconsin farmer, reality gave him quite the scare.
Join Market Rally host Chip Flory live from the Ravo AgriFinance booth at this year's Farm Progress Show, August 29th through the 31st.
As those crop scouts head out, market analysts will be watching closely. Tyne Morgan joins us now with more.
Thanks, Clinton. Yeah, here now with Brian Bastien of Advanced Trading. Brian, you know, we start off with the Farm Journal Crop Tour kicks off today, Monday. What are you looking for? Really, what do you want to see on this crop tour?
Well, those folks do a terrific job on that tour, Tyne. I think what we want to see is how those numbers that they find in the field correlate or don't correlate with the USDA numbers here earlier this month. There's a lot of debate about those USDA numbers, as there is every year. But those folks on this tour, the Farm Journal tour, do a great job, and they want to see how close that is to the USDA numbers.
Yeah, speaking of those USDA numbers, do you feel like USDA was too high or too low in certain states? I mean, when you look at some of these yield estimates, kind of what's your general feeling of how close they are or how far off they are this year?
You know, it's much tougher this year, Tyne, than a year ago. A year ago it was how big is big as far as the crop size. This year I was fortunate to participate in a crop tour about 2 weeks ago, and there's quite a bit of variability on the crop tour, and I think that's the word that will be seen across the tour next week, variability. So we don't have a strong opinion today. We just got to let this rest of this growing season play out. Maybe the corn might be a touch on the high side, but we just have to wait and see how it plays out.
You know, USDA said a response rate was down with this latest report, you know, and they really heavily rely on those farmer surveys to get an accurate production estimate. So I think response rates was somewhere around that 70%. In a year when we have this much variability in a field, you know, how important is it that you have more results and more surveys come in to get an accurate representation of this crop?
Well, every year when USDA does a survey, Tyne, you want to see that response rate be strong, because that's objective information, because they actually are the most objective source of information we have. So I think in a year, like you said, with so much variability, the more data the better. But every year is different, and this one may be just a bit more challenging because of that response rate. I think this is a year the trade's going to be waiting to see the whole comprehensive tour, because even variability across the regions, from the Eastern Corn Belt, as you mentioned, Iowa or Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, is going to be different from the Central Corn Belt, Illinois and Wisconsin, compared to the West, Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, the Dakotas, of course. So I think, you know, every year is going to be watched, every state's going to be watched closely, but I think the trade kind of wants to get that ballpark view of what the whole Corn Belt looks like.
All right, Brian Bastien, we appreciate it. Stay with us. We'll have much more Ag Day when we come back.
To talk with Brian one-on-one, call Advanced Trading at 800-664-2314 or head online to advanced-trading.com. Are you a game changer? Know someone who is? Chevron is searching for those people that have made an impact on the industry. Share your nominee at chevrondello.com/gamechangers. Dello, let's go further.
Welcome back to Ag Day on this Monday morning. Mike Hoffman joining us, looking at estimated rainfall over the last week, and really that kind of Central Plains area getting most of the rain.
They really did, and that's why the drought's gone away a little bit in some of that area anyway. You can see from northeast Texas on up into the Dakotas, but especially Nebraska, getting a lot of rain. It's more hit and miss in the east, as you can see there, and very little out west, but boy, it's that northeast part of Texas and much of Nebraska, some of that area getting 8 inches or more of rain from a week ago Saturday to this past Friday. Kind of a huge amount of rain in some of that area. Taking a look at things across the country as far as the drought monitor is concerned then. Despite the rains that you've been getting at times in the Dakotas, eastern Montana, still an extreme to an exceptional drought. It takes a long time to get out of a drought that is this extensive, not in area, but in how deep it is. I mean, extreme to exceptional, that's about as bad as you get. And again, that's been extending eastward a little bit. We'll have to watch that over time across Iowa and the northern portions of Missouri. But you can see over the past 4 weeks, we've been getting worse for a while, but it hasn't gotten any worse over the past couple of weeks in the far northern plains, which is good news, but it has gotten a little bit worse right there across parts of Iowa. It's gotten better, though, in the southern plains, where you folks have been getting a fair amount of rain as well. Let's take a look at things then this week. The jet stream starting off kind of zonal. Little ripples moving across the country, but you can see our model continues to develop a big trough in the east, a big ridge in the west. We've seen that pattern before a good chunk of this summer so far, but this one doesn't stick around. There's Wednesday. You can see this, our computer model continues to take that trough off to the east on Friday. The ridge comes in, a trough moves into the Pacific Northwest for the first time in a while, and then that kind of moves inland as we head into next week. So kind of an interesting transitional pattern there. Let's take a look at temperatures this week. I'm going below normal for the Great Lakes into the Central Plains. A lot of this area, it's especially going to be the second half of the week. Above normal for Florida, South Texas, and much of the central and northern Rockies. As far as precipitation this week, above normal from the north central plains all the way down to the southern Mississippi Valley into the southeast, a little bit of the Rockies, and then it's below normal in the west and much of the Great Lakes as that cooler air mass comes in. 30-day outlook for temperatures above normal on the coast and much of Canada, below normal for the central portions of the country. And as far as precipitation over the next 30 days, I'm going above normal from Alabama to New Mexico, Kansas, all the way southward. Below normal in the northwest. Most of the Corn Belt pretty close to normal. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. Boise, Idaho, first of all, lots of sunshine and not as hot today. High temperature up to 88 degrees. Texarkana, Texas, hot and humid, an afternoon thunderstorm in a few spots, high of 93. And Binghamton, New York, mostly sunny and rather pleasant, high around 81.
Well, up next, Machinery Pete's here to explain why he's keeping a close eye on the 2017 Farm Journal Midwest Crop Tour. And working alone has its dangers. Luckily for this Wisconsin man, he's alive to tell the tale.
DuPont Pioneer is auctioning off a Timty Super Hopper grain trailer, and all proceeds benefit the FFA. Register to bid at pioneer.com/chrome. That's pioneer.com/QROME.
Machinery Pete is brought to you by John Deere. Where can you find the most comprehensive inventory of John Deere certified pre-owned tractors, combines, and sprayers? MachineFinder.com. Sometimes the best new addition to your fleet isn't new.
Machinery Pete says he's paying close attention to the Farm Journal Midwest Crop Tour this week because of how it could impact machinery. Here's Greg Peterson to explain.
Well, that USDA crop report a week ago Thursday sure was a kick in the gut, wasn't it? You know, from where I sit, collecting auction prices and tracking used values makes me think we're going to start to see some geographic price differences around the country based on crop conditions. In fact, I saw that play out the day the report came out on August 10th. Now, one auction I was tracking, very nice farm auction, was in west central Illinois. Sale prices here were very strong. Here's an example. The 2009 Massey Ferguson 8680 tractor with 2,581 hours on it, sold for $100,000. That's the highest auction price I've seen in 3.5 years on an 8680. And all the prices on this sale by my friend Van Adkison were very strong that day. Now, same day in north central Iowa, August 10th, another farm auction, nice equipment, but up there, very dry, and prices were soft. In fact, they had a John Deere 9320 four-wheel drive bareback with 2,861 hours on it, sold for $74,000. Pretty soft. For comparison, back in January, down south in Missouri on a consignment auction, I saw another bareback 9320 with 1,700 more hours on it, sold for $81,500. So folks, pay real close attention to the Farm Journal Midwest Crop Tour coming out this week and those results, because I think the rest of the year there's going to be some buying opportunities on late model equipment in these stressed areas.
All right, thanks, Greg. Up next, this Wisconsin farmer saved his own life. His story coming up on In the Country.
In the Country, brought to you by Kubota. Learn more about Kubota SSV Series skid steers at Kubota.com or demo one at your local Kubota dealer today.
Many of our farmers and ranchers end up working alone at some point during the day, but what if you're injured? Well, if you're Doug Bergeson, you load up, drive yourself to the ER. Doug owns a vegetable farm and construction company in Peshtigo, Wisconsin. He was working on framing in a fireplace at home when the nail gun slipped, firing a nail straight into his heart.
It didn't really hurt. It just felt like it kind of stung me, and I looked down and I didn't see anything, and I put my hand there and like, that's not good. When I saw it moving with my heart, it's like, I'm not going to get anything done today. I can see that already.
So he did what anyone might do. He loaded himself up and drove to the ER.
A wrong heartbeat, a wrong position, and he would have had a much more complicated problem than he was bargaining for. And so he's quite fortunate from that standpoint. He was very astute not to remove it because he remembered Steve Irvin, and that's what played through his head.
Must have had somebody watching over me because it was close.
Bergeson spent 2 days in the hospital and has been recovering at home. He should be able to return to work this week. That's all the time we have this morning. Sure glad you tuned in. Start your day with us. For Betsy Gibbon, Tyne Morgan, and Mike Hoffman, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day in farm country.
AgDay is powered by Ram Trucks, America's longest lasting pickups.